Good morning, everybody. This is the Joint Risk and Resiliency Committee meeting. My name is Cecily Morris. I'm the chair of this committee. I welcome everyone here today. Our committee members, John Koelmel, B. Gonzalez, Michael Cusick, and Laurie Wheelock. We also have other trustees here today to join us for our meeting. I welcome our NYPA staff and Canal Corporation staff. This meeting was duly noticed as required by the open meetings law, and I call the meeting to order. Our first item on our list today is adoption of our proposed meeting agenda. Do the committee members have any amendments to the agenda?
Happy to move it as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion is carried. The next item is our discussion agenda, and we're going to start with Alexis Harley, the Senior Vice President, Chief Risk and Resiliency Officer, to speak briefly and introduce our presenters.
Good morning. Good morning, trustees, colleagues, and members of the public. And I'm so excited that everybody was in the room earlier and we were actually waiting to start the meeting. Great enthusiasm for our first Risk and Resiliency Committee meeting of the year. If we can go to the agenda slide, please, Troy. Awesome. So you'll see today, we'll begin. I'll give a brief overview of what we'll be speaking about during this committee meeting. Our presentation topics for you today are the update to our fiscal year end enterprise-wide risk summaries. We'll then give you the results of our latest risk management maturity assessment. We'll have updates on our merchant hedging strategy and our corresponding credit risk management program. And then we're going to pivot from where in the past we have spoken a lot about cybersecurity and AI. For this meeting, our first meeting of the year, we're kind of going back to our foundations, taking it down to the more physical ground. And so we'll be addressing our workforce safety risk management programs, and we will also get an overview about physical security. You can go to the next slide. As always, we have a packed agenda and there are a lot of details, so I'm going to keep it very simple for you. Your three key takeaways for today will be that our NYPA enterprise risk summaries will show that we've had a slight improvement with a reduction of one risk, and our Canal's enterprise risks are staying stable. You will see that our maturity scores have improved, and that was thanks to three specific improvements that we put in place. And then our merchant hedging, credit risk, physical security, and workforce safety mitigations are keeping pace with a rapidly evolving landscape. So those are the three key themes that we'll be bringing forward to you as we go through this agenda. To keep right on target, because it is pretty full, we're going to call up Tom Spencer to bring us through our enterprise risk summary update.
Thomas, with great anticipation. We watch you make the walk.
I'll try to have as much high energy as possible.
Tom, you always bring it. You always bring it. We know you won't disappoint.
I appreciate your confidence in me. But, thanks, Alexis, and good morning, trustees, NYPA and Canals, colleagues, and members of the public. As Alexis mentioned today, I'll be going over the year-end enterprise risk assessment. Just a quick reminder, right? The primary objective of our biannual assessment is to review our current risk profile and make sure that it is an accurate reflection of our risk exposures. So, Troy, if you go to the next slide, that would be awesome. So just a quick refresher of what is represented on this graph. It illustrates impact and likelihood, residual risk scores of the NYPA enterprise risk in relationship to the risk appetite. The enterprise risk name is located on the y-axis, and the impact and likelihood residual risk score is located on the x-axis. The impact is represented by the gray shaded area and the likelihood by the black shaded area. The thin blue line directly under the impact and likelihood scores represents the risk appetite range for the associated risk and where the risk score sets in context to the risk appetite level. In general, this year we saw a positive movement across the portfolio compared to the mid-year results. There are several reasons for this. The first being that several of our risk drivers stabilized. For example, we've been following the federal transition, and it seems like the intensity of proposals have seemed to slightly slow since the mid-year, with many of the proposals being caught up in litigation or being scaled back or not quite implemented yet. We also saw several of the enterprise risk close out their associated open audit findings with targeted completion dates in Q3 and Q4. Most of those were closed, so that was also a positive contributor to the risk scores. Additionally, the IBC team has continued to identify and increase control mapping to the operational risk, ensuring that we have adequate controls around our operational risk, also contributing to an overall positive trend in risk scores. This resulted in a recommendation to leave all the risk scores essentially the same, with the exception of one, which is sustained margin reduction. It's located about halfway down the page. After conversations with the risk owner, the risk sponsor, and the ERMC, we decided to decrease the likelihood of that from 3 to 2. And as you can see, it moved the score from the medium risk area down to the low risk area. We did a few things that supported that. The first is we did a historical look back over the last 5 years of the strong financial performance that we've had. And in each of those years, we finished above our target levels. Additionally, we had the settlement of the FERC transmission-based return on equity proceedings, which will help support our continued investment in transmission infrastructure. And then we also had the approved hydroelectric power preference rates, which had remained unchanged for 10 years. And under the new proposal, those rates will be phased in over the next 6 years. So all of those were positive contributing factors. And one of the reasons why we decided to increase or decrease the likelihood of sustained margin reduction from 3 to 2 and reduce that risk. If we turn our attention to the lowest rated risk on the x-axis, you'll see that ESG and DEI is grayed out. We identified ESG and DEI as an enterprise risk a few years ago. And since that time, it has consistently maintained and remained at the bottom of our risk scores. Given that ESG and DEI principles are deeply embedded in the organization's culture and operations, we intend not to show ESG and DEI as a standalone enterprise risk going forward. When we consider the integration in our day-to-day activities, it seems to make sense. Examples of how the integration manifests itself are reflected in our peoples and values and sustainability pillars of our strategy, and ESG and DEI be included in other of the enterprise level risks, such as attract, develop, and retain a qualified and diverse workforce, third-party risk, or destructive events. And although the ESG and DEI will no longer be displayed as a standalone risk, the risk team will continue to monitor ESG and DEI risk impacting their portfolio. Another item that I just briefly wanted to touch on were some of the risk drivers that impact many of our enterprise level risk on the right-hand side of the graph or the chart. The first one is federal policies and priorities. And we instituted a federal transmission working group earlier this year to ensure we had heightened focus and just visibility into some of the impacts and potential risk associated with some of the new federal policies and procedures that were coming out of the Fed. In doing so, we are keeping in front of what those potential impacts are and how we can try to plan to mitigate those in the future. The next driver we're following is grid reliability and rising energy demand. Certainly maintaining grid reliability in a time of potential growth is a paramount importance to our organization and the state. We are already out in front of this one with some of the activities around nuclear, our renewables projects, and some of our transition projects, things like Propel and Smart Path Connect. The final one that we're following are geopolitical tensions that can impact both the energy industry and NIPA. Many times, geopolitical risk manifests itself in heightened either cyber or physical security threats. And the physical security team, the cybersecurity team, and the risk management team are all keeping pace with these evolving threats. And as Alexis mentioned, Larry will give a little more detailed report around physical security later in the meeting. But overall, the key takeaway for NIPA enterprise level risk is the risks are stable and somewhat in a positive trend, and the portfolios being well managed within risk appetite. So I will pause there for any questions on the NIPA enterprise risk report out.
So Tom, those top 3 risks, it says we're bumping up against the upper limits of our risk appetite.
Yep.
And so what does that mean? We're in risk mitigation mode. I mean, we can't control volatility, and so are we doing incremental things to mitigate our exposure? I don't remember where we were, your earlier report. I mean, how that has or hasn't changed, but just operationally, what are we doing if we're saying we don't have an appetite to absorb incremental risk? So how we're, as said, philosophically, are we just, in my words, mitigation mode relative to those risks, or
Yeah. So
whether it's you or the operational team? I mean, what are we doing to ensure we don't bump up, or bump over?
Yeah. So for the blue lines for the risk appetite, the ones that that are shifted away from the green area are the ones we don't necessarily have a great degree of control over. In commodity market price volatility, we're actively hedging that as much as we can. Something that Earl and Dennis will get into later in the program. But it's not a risk we control, so we do have a higher risk appetite there. And if the market is to move, we'll have a big impact on that one. Critical infrastructure. I don't want to speak for Joe on this, but when an asset fails, it's usually a big deal. So it's tough to change the gray area, the impact on that, but we do work to reduce the likelihood. We're doing asset ISO 51000 and asset management, some of the life extension modernization programs. So we are attempting to reduce the likelihood with some of those big projects we have there. In the hydro generation forecast, I'm certainly working to refine that forecast and make that a little bit tighter as we go out in the future. So definitely working to try to decrease the likelihoods in those areas, not necessarily someplace where I think, given the nature of those risks, we can potentially decrease the impact a whole lot. But I'll turn it.
Maybe said differently, it seems our margin for error is very slim there. So again, as a board member, I look at that and say, okay, are we at risk because we don't have much wiggle room? There isn't margin for error. So are we primarily in mitigation mode? What are we doing to ensure we aren't taking incremental risk, or am I misinterpreting the message there?
No, I mean, I think we're doing a lot. So
I know we are.
I don't think we're at risk, but I'll turn it over to Joe if he wants to comment.
Yeah, if I may respond, I think especially in those examples up on top, I think where we have we're kind of bumping up against where the tolerance is, we also have a lot more clarity on those risks. So I think the mitigations so to your point, often you won't, an example I'm going to draw on is not on the utility side, it's on the canal side. But for example, lowering water levels is an operational mitigation to those risks. So we're up against it, but we can do some real-time mitigations from an operational perspective to do that. And the major critical infrastructure risk, it's high, we're up against it. but we have a lot of clarity on that risk. So we're very confident that we're going to stay under that based on our portfolio and the work that we're doing day to day.
Maybe I would just add there, I think just given the nature of our assets, they lend themselves to high impact events. And so we're always going to be operating in a world where infrastructure failure would have a high impact. And that's why we've dedicated resources over the last 5-7 years
Sure.
to all of our asset management and all the monitoring that we do and the investments we're making. I think our capital program is over $1 billion this year. So we're making the necessary investments, but we're always going to be operating in that environment of, high impact potential events, but we're doing all we can to mitigate those impacts.
And also, Chairman, this is a snapshot that we do every 6 months, but that is just to be able to present an aggregate picture before the trustees and our colleagues. However, risk mitigation takes place active on a daily basis,
Right.
and we do monitor for risk drivers, for trends. There are conversations that happen supported by the risk team, as well as just embedded in the business to look at health of assets and to monitor the risk levels. This is an area where, as Joe and Justin have just pointed out, the impact of asset-related risk, it's high financial impact. At the same time, we would likely not lower our risk appetite or try to get below risk appetite, because then we may be over-mitigated for the expense. And so we look to achieve that balance. This snapshot is just giving us the view that we are actually, doing well, keeping pace, and being able to maintain within appetite.
All right, and I'm just questioning more than challenging. I said there's not a lot of margin for error there. So if stuff happened and put us in, we were in harm's way, obviously in hindsight, you'd say, well, we knew we were living on the edge. We knew we, put ourselves in a high risk position because our margin for error was very slim. So that's the question I'm posing. What do we do to minimize the downside of things could go bump in the night? There's much that's out of our control. So are we comfortable, in spite of all we have invested, we don't need to invest even more? Are we comfortable that I defer here? I'm not criticizing. I'm not trying to arm wrestle anybody. The optics of that, to me, as a board member, get my attention that our top 3 risks are pushing the limit. We're right at the edge.
Yeah.
So I consider and say, well, why don't we just move the limits? Why are we being too conservative with how I'm not trying to play games with all of that. I'm just asking you guys. I say all the time, what keeps you up at night? Somebody better answer. Well, this is what keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
Because we're at the edge.
Right.
We're pushing the limits of the risk that we're willing to take, whether that's CEO, COO, CFO. Yeah, we're at the limit, and we're monitoring that on a regular basis. At least that's my takeaway. If I'm misconstruing it, let me know. And in terms of, we need more investment here, or we've got to prioritize here. We've talked about, it's all about execution, et cetera, et cetera. That's all I'm trying to understand, how you guys think about this.
So
or how we should think about it.
The one area that, as you said, you could always increase the risk tolerance. But where we really show the conservative part is on the gray bar, essentially the impact. We understand that we have conservative estimates on the amount of damage and the investment it would take to recover from that. So there is some conservative numbers in the score in the gray area. So it is up against it from a practical standpoint, but there's also contingency in some of those gray scores.
Oh, so you're sandbagging a little bit.
Well, I don't know
Not that
with
we've ever been
confidence.
accused of
We're
sandbagging.
sandbagging with confidence from our experience, our asset management program, and the visibility we have on those assets. So I think it's with some confidence that we understand that there will be some flexibility, but there's some conservative numbers on the score itself.
And I guess I would just add to that. I mean, at least in terms of critical infrastructure, it seems to me, like I said earlier, the impact's always going to be high, the way I think about it in most of our assets here. But where we can focus and where we can lower the bar, if you will, or move it to the left, is on the likelihood, right? The investments we're making to make an infrastructure failure less likely to occur. right? That's what the investments are all about, which should move the bar to
Well,
the
and
left.
it hasn't moved it. We're still on the edge. That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Does that imply we should be investing more because we don't want to live on the edge?
Got
We're
it.
more risk averse, or more risk averse organization. That's merely all I'm asking. Philosophically, if nothing else, what should we be doing to step back from the edge of the cliff? At least as the picture depicts it. Or, well, I'm not really, I don't feel like I'm at the edge of the cliff and you're overreacting
Right.
to the optics of this. So we can let it go. You can come back to us, but
Okay.
that's at least my takeaway. Otherwise, there's a pretty good comfort zone. Workforce health and safety is the other one, that sits at the edge. I know philosophically, it's priority and we're always investing and paying attention and the like, but anyway. Okay,
Got it.
enough said, point made. Tom,
All
way to
right.
get us started. I'm not sure, maybe you're still going.
No, way to bring the heat.
Exactly.
The,
Right out of the gate.
That right out of the gate.
Yeah,
But
right
to
out of
your-
the locker room, boom.
Boom,
we're
right
at
it
it.
is.
All right, all right.
You got to keep the head on a swivel.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
And to your workforce health and safety point, Steve, as Alexis says, is going to give us a little more detail around that. So if there's no other questions, we can flip to the canals risk profile. All right.
Oh,
Ed.
boy.
Uh,
Going back to back, bumper to bumper. on that,
Yeah,
Tom.
not the response I thought I was going to get when you brought up that slide, but so same graphical layout as NIPA and generally positive trends around the portfolio for the same reasons as NIPA, closure of some audits and a greater identification of ops risk and increased control mapping. A couple of items to note on the canals chart. So the first one is this report now includes cybersecurity and regulatory legislative risk that were not on the last assessment. If we focus on cybersecurity, which is the fifth one up from the bottom, you will see the initial risk scores after we consulted with the risk owner, the risk sponsor, and the ERMC were an impact of 3 and a likelihood of 2. This impact was slightly lower than NIPA's. It makes sense that given canals operations do not have the same level of system interdependency or critical control systems that interface with the power grid. With that being said, canals is continuing to become more and more digitized. Every month, they have some things that they're looking at right now, as far as like a new water management system, the use of drones and robotics. So the cybersecurity risk around canals is an area that the cyber and risk team are mindful of, and any potential changes in that risk profile will bring back to the board and leadership to let them know what we're seeing. Right above that is the legal and regulatory, I always get this, the regulatory and legislative environmental risk. So the initial score after meeting with leadership was also a 3 for an impact and a 2 for likelihood. And similar to cyber, the impact was slightly lower than NIPA. This also is pretty reasonable when you consider the greater amount of regulatory and legislative scrutiny that NIPA faces as an organization from things like FERC or NERC, whereas canals does face some legislative and regulatory scrutiny, but it's at a different level from organizations like the DEC. So there are 2 new additions for first time to the canals report, and we'll continue to report on those. And then also you'll see ES&G and DEI are grayed out for the same reasons I mentioned when we went over that with NIPA. So key takeaway here is, risk management is a key component of canals, and it's becoming more and more ingrained into their day-to-day operations, but overall the portfolio is being well managed. So I will pause there for questions.
Refresh my memory. So what's the critical infrastructure trend? Are we making progress and are we diminishing the gap between our risk appetite and our risk assessment there? I mean,
We are
gonna-
definitely,
We're gonna approve what, another 50-some million for a dam replacement and things like, so were we in the pink and we're making our way in back to the yellow and we gotta keep moving, or what have we done there?
well, the overall score hasn't changed, but we are definitely making progress. With the Madison Dam is
Right.
the latest example, and some of the other activities that we're doing. I mean, Joe, and Dave and I had conversations along with my team this year about like having a serious conversation, like, should we reduce that? Should we not reduce it? So we're starting to have that conversation because we're seeing some of the positive impacts of the work that's being done. We're not there yet. And, I don't want to speak for Joe, but, Joe goes comment, which I thought was right on, like putting us in risk appetite for critical infrastructure just doesn't pass the sniff test for us yet. And I think that's spot on, but I'll, defer to Joe or Dave.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Tom. I think with this one, I think the capital portfolio that's been reprioritized and revitalization, you'll see this almost immediately start to go down in the instant time that, Alexis has been speaking about as we start executing Madison Dam and lowering the water there to do that work. Both the impact number and the likelihood number will go down significantly. That's the biggest one today. And then our portfolio now prioritizes the next biggest one as we go down there for these assets. So we think in a very, when I say short period of time relative to canals in the next year or two, that's just going to continue to drop into the tolerable range. But as Tom said, we've had some, significant debates about where do we really think we are? And I said, I don't think I could represent that, it passes a smell test that we're within our risk tolerance. It's not there yet.
So further to my point earlier, what I would ask is you guys come back to us and say, okay, and I'll use your lower in the water, example, because to me that's a spot on and it's a simple one to understand. So worried about it, the asset imploding. So what do? We alleviate the stress, on the asset. We bring it down. So that's, a great simple example of the mitigation that we're taking.
Right.
We can't eliminate the risk any faster than we're working to do that, but here's how we're mitigating. So it would be helpful for us to understand, and I'd want to ensure, I hate to use the phrase paper the file, but because it trivializes it, but that we substantively document what we've done to mitigate that gap. That's the point I was trying to make on the prior slide. What are we doing day in and day out as leaders of the organization? What decisions are you making? And no, I don't care how much pressure there is from constituents to get the water level back up. We just can't because, we're under duress, Is that a fair request?
Very fair. And we've talked about it before and we can put together a summary for that for you.
Just so we better
examples.
Understand the actions we're taking in light of this. Okay.
Right. Yeah, we have it already.
Yeah, we have it already, and Yeah, we have that already, and we from last year we will update it with our more recent decisions and examples, and we can bring it back to the next full board meeting if you'd like.
Yeah, so that it's not, well, there's a problem and then something happens. Well, you knew there was a problem. What did you? I mean, I just want to make sure we've connected the dots and are most importantly taking actions that are consistent with the analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
We'll work with the team and get that done for you.
Okay.
Plus, I think we got to remember just historically at our meetings, we've watched the canal's progress and went from, looking for information to having information. Rebecca and Dave and the team have consistently tightened everything up, gotten things, as you noted earlier, they're becoming more digitized. And so I think what that doesn't show is the progress we've made. I think it was our last meeting or the meeting before where we talked about the fact that now we have the data and it's taken the time for the canals team to get all the data to be able to say, here's our priorities and why, and we can support everything. So it feels like to me the progress has been in the underlying work of the canals team, which isn't going to show on that, right? That's I was gonna say black and white, but a gray and black measure of risk. But we know that the progress is making a difference. And we don't see that up there, but I think as trustees, we know that that's true. And we know that the team has, just in the years that I've been on this board, the team has brought the canals into an area where all the information is there and we can work with that information. So
Yeah, we can't forget that the infusion of funds that we've had.
Sure, absolutely, has
made a
been-
huge difference in our
absolutely.
ability to do that.
absolutely, no doubt about it. Any,
Well, we're infusing a lot more than that.
Yeah, but it's made a
And
difference.
have
it's made a
for-
difference.
Yeah, it's helpful. Yeah, but I'm just making, I don't quarrel with any of
Yeah,
that. It's
no.
not a criticism. So I'm assuming that trend line has to be moving left. But if something were to happen,
Yeah.
we're all sit here and say, yep, we're operating not at the edge, we're over the edge. And if something were to happen, you guys knew something could happen and
Yeah.
what were you doing? So that's all I'm trying to clarify here. How are we taking assets and otherwise addressing it to ensure, whether it's canals or power, the authority themselves. So that's all I'm trying to get at, Cecily. Okay,
Agreed.
Oh,
Tom, more than you bargained for.
Any other questions for Tom?
Thanks.
I just said, thanks, Chair. You saved me from going over my 3 pages of mitigation activities that I had for
Okay,
canals. I know I
good.
can do that next time.
right, great.
Oh, okay.
But thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm back. Hello. Tom, thank you. Thank you for that overview, and trustees, thank you for that robust discussion. Much appreciated. Our next topic for today is to share with you the results of our latest risk management maturity assessment. So the authority began to measure its maturity levels back in 2021, 2022. If we can, I'm sorry, go to the next slide, please. And we use a diagnostic tool that was developed by Gartner. It's meant to be a self-assessment tool, and it's used across various industries. It's scored on a 1 to 5 scale, where 1 is low maturity and 5 is the highest maturity. During our first self-assessment, we scored ourselves a very conservative 3.2. In 2023, we decided to have EY come and perform an independent third-party assessment using the same Gartner methodology, just to verify our self-assessment results. During the period in between, we're continuously improving our risk management program, expanding our reach into deeper into asset management, into operational risks, and some other measures. When EY came back to us, and that was, I think, one of my first presentations here, joining the authority, we were scored at a 3.8. What you'll see is that by that 2023 period, we've actually now progressed to be above benchmark in several areas. The yellow benchmarking line represents electric and gas industry. Above that, you'll see a purple line, and that's basically government, state and local government, and I don't think not federal, just local. And then the top line is banking, finance, and the insurance industry. And they are typically considered by far the most advanced in terms of risk management practices and programs, given their heavily regulated nature. So this is a really positive trend that we're following, and a result that we've been quite proud of, to be able to show our programs at a caliber of such a high level. Recently now, at the end of this year, we've done our next self-assessment. We did perform that solely internally. However, we did share and review the results with both internal audit and our internal business controls team, just to substantiate the results, to make sure we weren't dipping into certain factors or having some recency bias or anything. At this point, our score is at a 4.3 using the Gartner methodology. Something to point out is that in 2023, we had actually set a target maturity level for ourselves to be within a range of 3.8 to 4.2. This is to make sure that we are making well thought out, valuable investments into our risk management practices. This is not about the investments into capital plans. This is about our programs, the tools that we use to measure and report on risk, and that we're not over investing for reduced value. Already we're above benchmarks for industries that are very high rated in terms of their practices. And so we want to be mindful of making sure that we are investing in our programs at a reasonable and sensible level. The three items that have helped us to improve our maturity score over the 2-year period from 2023 until now were the implementation of a risk liaison program. That had been an area in the rubric where champion networks are a good practice in many organizations, and it was something we did not have in place. However, trustees, colleagues, and the public, we did promise you not to try to institute a new program for the sake of a score. And so I know we've reported to you in the past about how we developed our risk liaison program in partnership with HR to be something that would not only increase our risk maturity in the business units, but also serve as a brand new professional development offering. The second thing that we focused on was to advance our emerging risk capabilities. And this is where we have presented to you in the past also about our use of scenario planning, our more advanced horizon scanning activities. And a good example of that was how we utilized that in our federal transition working group to help us sort of sort through the signals, sort through the noise to see any of the signals coming up from that way. And finally, it's this committee. The launch of the board level risk and resiliency committee is a very strong best practice that also contributed to us being able to score ourselves higher using that rubric. So really, really great, really impactful next steps that we took, very targeted. Given that we're now just slightly above our target range for maturity level, our really next steps are just to make sure that we continue to keep pace with evolving risk practices. Again, we tend to focus on like good practices. Best practices might not always be something that is suitable to our industry and our needs as an organization in the energy industry. We want to make sure that our programs keep pace. Gartner from time to time does update its methodology. There are some core components to it, and then it will add some additional items to score based on overall how the risk management industry is evolving. Our two areas that we're going to focus on the most going forward, again, we've presented to you a bit in the past, enhancing our risk insights by better aligning our assurance activities. We have both second line, which is my risk team, as well as the internal business controls team that sits within business services finance, and also internal audit. We're looking to streamline the ways that we interface and to look at the data that we have to make sure that we're driving deeper insights from the information that we have and the conversations that we have with the business. That'll also help us to look ahead more proactively. And secondarily, as we've all spoke about in the past, advancing our analytic capabilities where it's sensible. We're looking at some tools that may help us better horizon scan in partnership with our strategy business unit, which is also interested in the same. And we've shared before that there's a really tight feedback loop between the risk process and the strategic planning process to make sure that we have the right inputs and outputs informing our next steps. Any questions?
So we're overinvested.
A skosh, Chairman.
Well, our target's four.
Yeah.
I guess is how I look at that. So you're saying your target's a range plus or minus 20 basis points. So our target's 4.
Yes.
I don't say that for comic relief. I mean, we have had this conversation. I hate looking at risk in a vacuum. It's a risk reward, equation, and want to ensure that investment at risk doesn't come at the expense of relevant reward.
Yes.
And that we don't become the risk, aversion pendulum doesn't swing too far and all the rest of that. So I don't know, are we comfortable? Are you comfortable? Are we comfortable, Justin and team, that our, by our own assessment, incremental investment in risk management isn't compromising our overall effectiveness and ability to generate and provide appropriate rewards and returns?
I don't think it's affecting that at all. I mean, I think, if you look at the graph there, that we're really pushing hard to, to get to our target. So, this will be, a variable assessment, if you will. And, we overshot a little bit. I think the investment in that, it has certainly been worth it because we've elevated the whole way of doing business and the risk culture that we're trying to establish. But, as we go forward, we'll certainly be conscious of whether that's pulling us back on anything that we would like to otherwise do. I don't think that'll be the case, but I hear you on your observation, and we'll make sure that we're not tying our hands by being too risk averse, which I think was your point.
Yeah, just it's appropriately balanced. And
Right.
somewhat counter to or out the other side of my, the earlier questioning, are we living on the edge?
Mhm.
Are we mitigating here? Are we,
Yeah.
unduly focused on advancing our risk management at the expense of otherwise? Or is risk management, if you pulled the team, is risk management a barrier or an obstacle as opposed to an effective, tool that enables us? So, okay.
Okay.
And in the meantime, Chairman, we can work to get that score down. I'm just joking. I promise I'm just joking. I think something else we can keep in mind, Chairman, too, is that the pace of change in many industries is quite rapid. And so this will give us some cushion now to make sure that we're not falling behind. Our use, for example, of AI and risk management, it doesn't exist right now, right? We are using our typical approaches, our existing tools. So it'll give us, that'll help us be mindful that we don't have to really rush forward too much. We're in a very, very comfortable position in terms of our program, so that even if there's some change in the industry, we wouldn't feel that we are far behind in terms of being able to provide service.
Looking at what you have there for your other benchmarks between utilities and state and local, you got 39 entities. I mean, I got to believe we're one of 39. It's hard for me. I'd be blown away if anybody's scored better than we are. I would think we're at the top of the list there, given the gap between where the benchmarks are and where we are. So I'd be curious to know that. So it's just, we're best in class, and I'm just making sure we're comfortable. We need to be best in class.
Understood.
So
Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
And Alexis,
Any
one of the
questions?
threads I'm seeing, and probably will through the remainder of the presenters this morning, is how important you have prioritized or made sure is communication within the organization for all the different entities, and it shows. And your presentations show that you're communicating across the board, and I think that's a great step for the authority.
Thank you, Trustee. Any other questions? Our next topic is on our merchant hedging program and then our corresponding credit risk management program. But I'll call up just for space purposes. First, Dennis Chang.
Paul, thanks for coming.
All right. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Board, Trustees. Good morning, NYPA. Good morning, public. I'm going to go over the latest merchant hedging strategy for the new year, which is 2026. When we talk about the merchant hedging strategy, we like to look at this chart first, because this is a good illustration of how NYPA's generation is broken out according to its allocations. The largest, obviously, is our customer programs. That's the generation that is allocated to all the different programs of NYPA's customers, and that makes up about 75 to 80% of the whole portfolio. Those are typically contracted at fixed price, right? So there's no exposure to the commodity market price volatility, as Tom had spoken about earlier. The second bucket, which is the merchant piece in orange, is generation that's left over after all the customer allocations are said and done. That's sold into the wholesale energy market. So obviously there would be that exposure to price volatility. The third smaller piece there, power proceeds, is typically contracted at a fixed rate as well, but it's a little bit unique in nature because it has a market component in the settlement process, dependent on whether the region actually uses the physical power or not. That there's a separate hedging strategy designed for that specific program. Today, we're going to focus on the merchant hedging strategy, which is really designed to, it says here, mitigate the risk exposure to market price volatility. Next slide. Okay, so this will just sort of review the concept behind our merchant hedging strategy, which is it follows a programmatic method. What that means is we're layering on hedges throughout the year to reduce the financial price risk and stabilize merchant revenue. How we do that is we set monthly targets. It's a monthly schedule. It's a volumetric target that we try to achieve every month to finally hit an annual final number, right? An annual percentage number. And we execute that strategy for 3 years out. So in this case, we're trading for 2027, 2028, and 2029. 2027 being the most heavily traded for the proximity reasons. What this allows us to do is we don't have to time the market. We're following a set schedule, and it definitely prevents us from speculating. The results of it, again, is reducing the financial risk from market price exposure, allows us to reduce the uncertainty of our future revenues coming from merchant generation sales, and overall supports the budgeting planning process of the capital expenditure for NYPA. So this shows us what we've achieved as of last year, completing our hedging strategy. So what we've traded in 2025 for 2026. We set a target of 45%, hedging 45% of the merchant energy volumes, and a target of 65% of the merchant capacity volumes. And we've successfully completed that by the end of last year. And in doing so, we've reduced our price risk exposure by 46%, and that equates to $54 million. And to put that into context, that's $54 million out of $118 million risk exposure. So it's quite substantial there. Next slide, please. So this year, our targets have adjusted slightly. We've made it 35% of our merchant energy volume and 50% hedging of our merchant capacity volume. And our current forecasts calculate that once those percentage or targets are completed, the risk reduction is about 40% of the whole risk portfolio. And that equates to about $70 million of risk reduction out of $180 million risk. I'm going to pause right there before I get to the last slide.
So back up the two slides.
Yeah.
Back up one is.
This is the concept. This is the sort of the idea behind the hedging strategy. So the next one. Yeah. This is what we followed last year.
That was 25. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Bad. Traded in 2025 for the year 2026 because we're hedging for the 3 years out. We've had a target of 45 in energy and a 65% target for capacity.
Okay. And you took 45 down to 35.
Yes.
Because.
So actually, if you stay on the last.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's a good segue because every year, as we design these strategies, we look at a couple of things. We don't set just a normal percentage target minimum and go every year beyond that using the same numbers. We take into consideration a lot of market signals, a lot of geopolitical events, weather patterns, news, and all that. Starting last year, we've heard a lot, as most of you have heard, the supply and demand margin of energy across the Northeast is somewhat more narrow than what it used to be before. And that's for many reasons. The obvious ones being strong load growth, and that's coming from the AI data centers, the semiconductor facilities, and just electrification in general. The supply side is a little less certain, right? There's a lot of aging generators that's being decommissioned, also renewable projects that are in and out, and it's sort of in flux. So that's a little bit of an uncertainty there. And so that margin is slightly narrow for the near and far future as we stand today. But what that means for NYPA is naturally long power that actually values our asset a lot stronger. So on a hedging perspective, if you look at it, you don't want to lock in too much for the future right now, knowing that in the future there's some revenue opportunity, a larger revenue opportunity for NYPA's assets. So that's kind of the idea behind why we scaled back slightly on our hedging percentages for the new year. The second one, elevated variability in hydro generation volumes. We've seen in the past couple of years, a lot of the forecasts have been indicating that we're reverting back to the means. And what that technically means is less water than in the prior years. Our forecasts right now actually reflect that the hydro volumes are actually decreasing from what we've noticed in the past few years. But this is more so focused on that variability. Yes, it's actually reflecting what's actually happening, but if you look at it from a month-to-month scale, some months you're well above the forecast, some months you're below the forecast, and other months you're right at. So in the cases that we fall below, the actuals fall below the forecast, and you've set a certain hedging target, you are at risk of potentially being over hedged, right? If you don't actually have the volume of water to generate power,
Right.
you may be at risk. So we kind of scaled that a little bit heavier this year, and that added to the reason as to why we've scaled back the hedging percentages. And the last one, less liquid, that's just a market signal. I believe the our counterparties are dealing with the same uncertainty risks as we are. So they're less inclined to trade anything beyond 2027. They still do, but it's far less activity than what we have been exposed to in prior years. So so that's why we sort of scaled that back as well, or weighed that into the whole formula as to why we had to adjust our hedging percentage targets a slightly lower.
Is this the first we've stepped it back in a while?
Oh, no, it isn't. We adjust up, we adjust down.
Okay.
Last year, I believe, compared to the prior year, we slightly adjusted down as well.
Okay.
But the year before that, we scaled up, and it's a sort of like our due diligence
Yeah.
as we design the
no,
strategy. This year, we wanted to kind of point out specifically the three major components that influenced
very
us.
So more downside risk of overplaying our hand, my words. Okay.
Yes, in the hopes of
And the market's just tightening overall, so
yes,
our exposure is inherently reduced because,
everyone's sort of
exactly.
dealing with the same level of uncertainty. But as for the first bullet right there, it's actually a positive outlook.
Yeah.
Not to promise anything, but
Yeah, well, you
it
just
is
did.
a positive
You just
outlook.
did.
And you're along
We'll
the
be looking
power.
for that. We'll
Yeah.
be looking for that.
So
Because we gotta make some investments. We got some risks to mitigate, so we gotta make some more money here. All right,
yes, sir.
very good.
Any other questions
Yeah,
for
very good.
Dennis?
Thank you.
Great.
Oh, yes, and I'll pass it over to Earl for the rest.
I mean, as you look longer term, what's your crystal ball say as you get out a couple of years? I mean, is it water and what do you
You're
guys?
almost out of
You
there.
should, one more, Dennis, one more step. One more step,
Keep
Dennis.
walking and talking. I mean, this is more, I don't know, what are you guys thinking? I mean, as you look, how do you see the market evolving as you look longer term?
I mean, I think
That's you, that's.
Adam's got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I think everything that Dennis is saying is right. I mean, there,
I'm not implying it isn't, I'm
yeah,
just,
yeah.
no,
No,
the
I mean,
next slide, the 28, as you, what do
Yeah,
you, is
I mean,
there-
again,
what's the
you-
speculation at this
So-
point, literal, figurative?
we talked earlier about, the LPPC and what others are seeing.
Yeah.
Everybody's seeing the same thing. We're seeing higher demand.
Yeah.
due to electrification in general, not just AI, but vehicles, buildings, all of that is putting more pressure on. And we are somewhat supply constrained because fossil fuel assets are coming off and have been faster than renewables have been coming on.
Right.
So it's a pure supply demand situation where there's just a lot of tightening. And, you know, we've seen it in the numbers and we're seeing how it's affecting us more. So we're not seeing the data center AI specifically in New York yet, but it's happening around us. So we're the biggest market for AI and data centers is PJM,
Right.
where, you know, down in Virginia, Maryland, we're the biggest concentration of data centers. So we're seeing less available power to be able to import from those other markets, as well as Canada. Canada's also been supply constrained. They've overcommitted in many ways their hydro to both New England and New York, and they've experienced droughts in the western part of their country. Again, a supply constraint happening in Canada. They are building out a tremendous amount of new generation, but that's not going to come online for another 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So I think there's a period here where we're going to be in a very tight market and trading range in terms of what we see.
Which should work to our benefit.
Yes, but you know, our benefit could end up translating in somebody else's higher costs.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure we keep costs as low as we
Yeah,
can,
understood.
regardless.
Yeah, I don't mean that in
Yep.
a egregious way, but yeah, okay. Yeah, very good. Thanks, Dennis.
Okay, good morning, trustees, executive management, and members of the public. I'm Rolf Lagi, Senior Director of Marketing Commodities Risk. I've stood before you before in prior meetings where I've championed the value of having robust governance in managing commodity market price volatility. As Tom mentioned earlier, it continues to be one of the top enterprise risks, so we continue to be diligent and coordinated in our approach when we manage this risk. You always see Dennis and I up here on the podium with me presenting in tandem with him, because that's a direct result of the activities that Dennis does to manage the risk and how it impacts our credit profile. Dennis's area of market risk impacts liquidity risk, because what happens is that when we enter into hedges, we've now entered into relationships with external counterparties. And this is where my team steps in to manage these relationships. Since these transactions, as you mentioned, Trustee Koelmel, with external counterparties are for future years, 2027, 2028, and 2029, what we do is we look to monitor that our trade partners have the ability to honor their contractual obligations to NYPA, that essentially that they'll still be around to do business. So this is why it's important to have a highly rated, diverse mix of counterparties, as well as having the ability to manage the credit lines for Dennis to use, so that we don't unnecessarily extend cash or pledge any funds that the organization can use to support other initiatives. So I've talked a lot about governance and how it looks, but kind of I want to point the attention to the section on the right, and that how does this look when you have a program that's successfully in place. So at the beginning of 2026 of this year, ERM, Dennis's team, has had open positions of energy with a notional value of over $300 million. Over that was spread over 17 counterparties, all of which continue to be investment grade. And of all those 17, 16 of which were not posting any collateral at all to support those hedge during its life cycle. Of the one where we do post collateral, that's because we do business on the exchange, where all transactions require margin. As you can see, I've listed on the bottom of that chart, we have about 1 million posted in collateral, which is less than about 0.5% in terms of the whole size of the portfolio. So just wanted to give a magnitude.
You said it's one counterparty.
Yep, it's just the exchange.
Okay.
But the reason we allow this is because trading on the exchange allows us to continue to transact when counterparties have little or no interest in the products that we want to trade. And at the same time, knowing that there are these margin requirements, my team sets guidance so that when Dennis's team does use the exchange, he only uses it when pricing is competitive and beneficial for us. So I think, Dennis and I have talked a lot about the hedging program and its impact on the credit portfolio. But as we begin to hedge 2027 onward, I think we're confident that the counterparty portfolio that we have in place is able to support our financial objectives and hopefully kind of walk it back a little bit from living on the edge, maybe just looking a few feet over. But I think we do have a good program, and I think Dennis and I work very well in managing this risk. With that said, I think Dennis and I are open for questions.
17 down from what it was a year ago, or?
It's the same number. I've just listed the ones where we have active positions.
Okay.
But we have about low 20s, but I think Dennis's team makes good use, and my team provides guidance in spreading it around.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Got to save some questions for Larry. Larry's coming up.
And so we're going to move now from commodities trading to people, our most important asset. So Steve Rutledge, our VP of Environmental Health and Safety, is going to talk us through our risk management updates.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board, and I'll say everyone else. All right, keep it short. All right. Good slide, please. So I've been here for a little bit over a year now, which has been a great move, and I have really appreciated, everyone's cooperation and the participation I've received. So, but one of the things that I did when I came here was go out and do a lot of discussions and a lot of talking with people. All right, talked with management, talked with employees, talked with union leadership, and just to get a flavor of where we are from a safety and a risk perspective. There was a lot of things that we looked at and a lot of things that I came and that I brought in from my previous, roles that I've had and companies I've worked in. And I was able then to go about and look at, hey, what are the things that we need to look at? What are the areas we need to concentrate on? So the first one we looked at was, of course, organizational and people. So in looking at this, I decided that, hey, we have a lot of really good things in place. We've got a lot of good processes, procedures, those types of things, policies. And looking at how we were aligned became, an obvious thought that, all right, there's a way or we can make some improvements here. So what we've done with this is identified a number of new roles, new groups that needed to be established, brought those people in, have established those roles. The first one we looked at was strategy. Got a lot of feedback that, hey, you guys are good, but we really don't have a really good strategy for moving forward with EHS. So we've established a strategy group or strategy person, put it that way. The other one was with regulatory compliance. You ask what keeps you up at night? What are the things that really, make you think about what's going on? And, we have internal audit. They've done a great job over the years of looking at, where we are from a compliance standpoint. But with me, it was, all right, I want to know exactly what are the things, where are we that we may have an issue with from a compliance, from a regulatory standpoint, things that can either impact us from environmental or mainly from a safety perspective. Do we have everything in place? Are we all aligned? Are we doing things the right way? Do we have the right tools for employees? So we've established a regulatory compliance group, and I think that's going to pay big dividends going forward. The other area was looking at project management and the construction oversight. Engineering and project management group has done a great job. And talking with them, they were like, talking with Trish Lombardi especially, she was like, hey, you guys can take this and then you keep running it since it's EHS. I think that will be a big impact and help us out as we go forward. So we've established another group there. And then lastly, we looked at EHS training. Bringing everything on board or bringing it back into the EHS organization just helps us then be consistent, understand, what our employees are needing. Also looking at the tasks that they do, conducting, TNAs, training needs assessments for each employee, for each one of the tasks that they do based on their job classification, because they're all different. St. Lawrence does work differently than Niagara, and the two classifications there from an operator may have different aspects that they're doing. So making sure from a compliance standpoint, we've got the right training in place. So those are some of the areas we looked at. Alignment, as I talked about. When I got here, we were corporate and then we had the sites and we were two separate groups, two separate organizations. So one of the things I found out quickly was looking at, all right, hey guys, how would they do confined space? Well, I've got 5 different ways of doing confined space because we didn't have that alignment. So now we pulled everybody back under the corporate umbrella. So we've got that consistency. So we can do sharing of best practices and sharing of resources, which will make us, much better, move us forward. And then, so then going on to communications and engagement. So we talked with, we looked at some of the things that we're already doing, like a Monday minute. And I'm like, okay, what is a Monday minute? And I go, so basically it's it's a tailgate, right? It's a tailgate topic we're sending out. So let's call it weekly tailgate topics. So just making things clear on how we do it. Seasonal campaigns. Justin kicked off our winter, our campaign for zero, or a zero injury campaign. And that's a 2-pronged campaign in that we have a winter injury campaign, and we also have a summer injury campaign where we looked at throughout the year, when are the times that you have the most injuries? Winter, summer, all right? Most work, coldest weather, those 2 areas. But the campaign is based on looking at past practices or past injuries or incidents, and then communicating that out to the employees on a weekly basis, just to keep, their minds alert so that they understand, hey, wait a minute, this has happened before, it could happen again. So that helps reduce the number of issues we're having, and we've seen that this year already. So that was a good one. Introduced another one, which is called Why I Work Safely campaign. So right after I got here, I was looking at, we had just completed a safety culture survey in 2024, and the results came back from that. We are a reactive company at this point. We want to get to the point of where we're proactive so that we're taking care of each other. But right now we're reactive, which is good. That's fine. That's where it's the middle of the stage that we need to be in. But some of the things that we're working on here are that looking at how do you have employees take ownership? So the Why I Work Safely campaign is a simple campaign, done it before. You ask people, what makes you work safely? Why do you come to work each day? And I've had everything from people, a lot of it is everybody has family pictures they bring in, or they'll send pictures of cars, homes, vacations. And my favorite one was a guy who sent in pictures of him holding $100 bills. But that was just him. So it was a good campaign. So we're working through that, and we'll get those up. And what we do with the pictures, we take and we make them into a big banner and put it up at the entrance of the locations. So people can understand, you come in each day and it's a reminder. Hey, I work safely for myself. Oh, wait a minute, I work safely for, my teammate. So a lot of good things there. Positive recognition. That's always a good one. I've, throughout the years, I've heard multiple times, hey, you guys do a great job letting us know when we mess up or we're not doing something correctly. But you don't do a good job whenever we're doing things the right way. So we've introduced a positive recognition program we'll be kicking off later this year. And that's just to, reward, to acknowledge employees that are doing the right thing. And then mental safety assessments. This is a new concept we introduced. It was to make sure that, employees, as you're going out and they're doing their work right before they start a task, you go through the pre-job planning and you go through the job briefs. But then right when you start to do the task, you stop. You take 60 seconds and just look at what you're about to do. Make sure, wait a minute, all right, nothing's changed from what I was looking at before. I do have the right tools, and yeah, so now I can proceed. So something simple as that prevents injury. So moving that in the right direction. Questions on people? No? Yeah. All right, systems and process. We're moving into a digital age here. We've updated our system process. All right, so we'll talk about this, executive policy updates. So policy updates this year, 2026, we're implementing a crane and lift and rigging plan, which is a big lift for us. Yeah, big lift for a crane plan. All right. Drug and alcohol. We're working on that program now. Electrical safety procedure. This is an update to an existing procedure and a new procedure on electric vehicle maintenance, which is something we needed to put in place. Technology. Yeah, we have implemented EHS Maximo. Maximo is our new EHS management system that we're putting in place. It will give us the ability to understand and manage, all of our information that we're gathering from injuries, environmental events, those types of things. and will help us going forward to be able to, just mine the data and see what is trending and how we're, where we're going from there. And then lastly, we talk about metrics. We've always measured lagging indicators, the DART rate, all of our KPIs. So, to move us forward and make us a better company and to improve our safety culture and all, we're moving into additional metrics, everything from corrective actions from the regulatory compliance assessments to, safety training completed, then managerial safety visits, which is a new one that Justin and Joe have, agreed to have their teams go out and, interact with teams or crews that are out in the field. And then looking at number of projects with the EHS interface. So just making sure that we have the right amount of, touch points when it comes to projects, to the oversight of the project and everything else. Next slide, please. The last thing I wanted to talk about was our EHS management system. So one of the things I did notice when I got here, we didn't have this, and it's something that's very important from an EHS perspective. Like I said, we had a lot of policies, procedures, processes on how we do things, but the EHS management system, which is our plan, do, check, adjust system, is something that's very important from an EHS perspective, period. This basically is our anchor. This is why and how we do everything associated with EHS. So a lot of things here, a lot of the leadership and the support are two elements, 1 and 6, that are extremely important, but everything else is pretty much self-explanatory. And this is all tied back to Vision 2030 Renewed. Questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Just the comparison or the differences and the needs between canals and NIPA, right?
Yes.
Because canals always had a little more difficulty or issues around safety. So I'm just curious to see how you're adjusting there.
Yeah, so what we've done so that we can get this synergy together, we have pulled all of our EHS organization together now. So I treat canals and NIPA as one, and we address their issues the same as we're addressing the NIPA side. But you're right, their issues are different, and we put processes and we put procedures in place along with some policy changes and things like that. So we make the adjustments as needed, in particular for however it's actually is the process that's going to be needed for that. Make the improvements. All right. Anything else? If not, thank you.
Committee members, I'm conscious that we're running over time. Do we have the capacity to hear a brief 5-minute physical security update from Larry, or would you like us to pass?
Been waiting all morning.
All right, Larry, you're up.
We'll keep going. Nice try, Larry, but you're coming up.
You were taking one for the team there, Larry? Come on.
I'm happy to take it for the team. So good morning. I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm Larry Mallory, the Senior Director of Security and Crisis Management. I was going to talk a little bit about sort of the 24/7 persistent threat, but I'm going to skip over some of that and just get into the meat. But the point I was going to make about that was that we are lucky to have a dedicated 24/7 management and union security staff who is implementing our program and protecting us every day. Some of what I'm talking about today are their successes. A big one last year was in 2025, the FERC Department of Security Inspections conducted a physical and cyber security inspection fleet-wide. And I know we're pivoting from cyber, but this was combined physical and cyber. Part of it was the physical security of the cyber assets, which is why I'm talking about it and Vic's not talking about it. A couple of things I wanted to highlight for you. No violations as a result of that inspection. So that's great, no violations. Some minor recommendations, none of them focused on new controls, none of them focused on cybersecurity or physical security lapses, but focused on paperwork and some reporting. So all good stuff. In the closing briefing, the FERC inspectors, and Trustee Morris, I wanted to point this out based on what you said, a lot of positive comments on the teamwork aspect. So we had physical security, site security, risk, EH&S, crisis management, everyone got together. And what they told us was among the best level of teamwork and collaboration they've seen across the country, which is great to hear. Doesn't surprise us, right? Because we live that every day. And but I did want to point that out to the team. Vic, I'm going to maybe skip over you, but Vic will give me the thumbs up that we worked together on this since it was so that completes a cycle beginning in 2024 of FERC conducting security inspections at all of our licensed projects No violations at any of them. A number of recommendations for transparency, but no violations, all projects in the past 2 years. If you give me the next slide, I was going to talk a little bit about the changes in NIPA and the new tool. So as you know, I've been at NIPA 11 years, and we didn't have TOP, right? We didn't have nuclear. We didn't have renewable strategic plan. And all of those great opportunities comes with new risks. When I started here, we never had to deal with public protests. We had very little negative sentiment. Now these are things that we deal with on a daily basis. And the challenge we have is fake news, real threat, right? Just because someone says something that may or may not be accurate, that really doesn't matter. That could still translate from that negative sentiment into action. So that's something that the team is dealing with on a day-to-day basis that we frankly never had to do in the past. What I have on the screen here is a couple of dashboards that we have up in our ISOC and 24/7, and they're monitoring real-time intelligence, open source media, social media on those topics. So we have one for nuclear, we have one for renewable generations. We have a host of them, some of them EH&S, wildfire, some of them more security focused. It's a cliche, right? But planning for the worst, hoping for the best, but you don't get to that hoping for the best without the planning for the worst. So I wanted to highlight that for the team. And then in addition to the new risks, new opportunities, a lot of new tools. So in the past, you've heard Peter from the robotics team talk to you, and you guys have approved some of the drone and UAS program. So on the security side of the house, we are using the tools that Peter and the team have given us. So approximately 30% of our NIPA security staff is either licensed or completing their Part 107 license so that they can be drone pilots. So 30% of our staff fleet-wide, that's great. In 2025, we did 130 security site-specific UAS missions. So a ton of drone flights in NIPA, but 130 of them for suspicious activity response or threat and vulnerability assessments or enhancing security controls. So we're using the tools that the team has given us on a day-to-day basis. In 2025, we got 2 drone-in-the-box units installed at Crescent and Jarvis, which gives us the opportunity to fly those missions remotely, and we have a couple more coming this year. So I know I'm going fast in the interest of time. The highlights I wanted to make for you is using the new tools to help the staff implement the program every day, planning and responding for new and evolving threats every day, and continuing every day implementing the daily program to keep us all safe and secure. And I'm happy to represent the security staff fleet-wide, which is doing a great job and sort of makes this presentation a little bit easier. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Blair, very well done.
Appreciate you.
Yes.
Thank you, Larry.
Really.
Well, in that case, I'm going to.
Thank you.
As you're walking away, there's that dashboard. So what is it that's being monitored there again?
So these all represent individual dashboards. They're monitoring all kinds of sources, social media,
Okay, got it.
traditional media, EISAC, MSISAC,
Okay.
and it sort of aggregates them. It gives
Synthesizes
them-
all that.
Right, and it's geo-fenced. We also, I got to show it to Ben yesterday, so we have NIPA and canal set up. So if we have an incident happen within X number of miles from the Niagara Power Project, the team will get an alert.
Okay.
If we have a nice thing about that is a lot of these, like we've had a couple of protests here at White Plains. Those we may get social media about, so we can plan and be ahead.
Got it. Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we had all of those presenters today. For each one of them, it was informational. We don't have any votes or needs to move any motions forward. The only thing on our consent agenda today is adoption of the minutes from our meeting held on September 16th. So I look to a board member to. Okay, thank you.
Aye.
All in favor? All opposed? Carried. Thank you. Our next meeting is not until September 15th, but in each of our board meetings, Alexis and her team provide additional information. What I found with Alexis is she's always open. So if you have anything in particular, contact her. She'll make sure that it gets answered and before the board. She's great about that. And I thank the entire team today. This has been a good presentation. We did go over a little, but it was necessary and it was beneficial to all of us.
Good.
So,
Very
motion to conclude our meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's it for our Joint Risk and Resilience Committee.